What illegal thing do you do on a regular basis? I have never told anyone about this before, but back when I was 15, 1979, I stole a Datsun 240Z car in my neighborhood. I was walking home from a friend's house one hot summer night, and as I walked by this cool Z car, I noticed a single key sticking out of the driver's door lock. I had always thought that car was cool and thought it would have been bitchin' to drive. Well, it was. So I kinda looked around and saw no signs of life anywhere, so I got in and drove it off. It was a super nice car. I drove all around the valley, grew up in Palm Springs. This car was too nice to be treated to a joyride, so after a few hours of driving it, I took it back and parked it right back in its parking spot at about 4 a.m. I figured it was very unlikely that the owner would even know it had been driven, other than it missing about a third of a tank of gas. But I did keep the key because they would think they just misplaced it somewhere. And I guess that's exactly what they did, because a couple weeks later, I did the same thing. Only this time it was almost out of gas, so I had to put some in it. Did the second time just like the first time. About a week later, I did it again. That time, I drove it up to Big Bear Lake because I was dying to drive it on mountain roads. It was a blast. Until I stopped at a little gas market to get a snack and bumped into one of my older brother's good friends who knew I was only 15 and didn't have a driver's license or a car, much less a vintage sports car. I can't remember the lies I told him, but knew I was going to be in deep shit when I got home. I hauled ass back to PS, stopped at 7-Eleven, and filled the car with gas and snuck it back into their driveway. I took a pen and scribbled out a thank you note and told them that I really loved their car and they really shouldn't leave the key in the door overnight. Oh, and by the way, I filled the tank for you. Thanks! Oh, and my brother's friend. He never said a word to anyone about seeing me. Story number 2. This reminds me of a crazy experience I had back in high school. My parents were out of town for the week and I had the place to myself. After school one day, my buddy and I went skateboarding at a nearby church. It was quicker if you drove behind the Kroger to get to the church than to drive around the block. As we drove, we saw a big beer delivery truck with 3 big stacks of beer just sitting there. We decided it was a good idea to park around the corner, pop the trunk, wait for the delivery man to go inside, then snatch a few cases. That's what we did and got away scot-free. We even went straight next door to the church and skated for an hour. Later that afternoon, I'm at home alone, preparing for the big party I was going to throw with all this free beer when there's a knock on the front door. It's the cops. He says, "Is that your gray Honda out there in the driveway?" "Yeah." "We got a report of some kids speeding through the neighborhood and giving a woman the finger when she told you to slow down. Was that you?" I was so relieved they weren't asking about the beer that I was happy to admit that I was speeding and flipped off some lady earlier in the day. The cops told me to slow down in the future, and then they left. My party was pretty lame. Story number 3. It is almost impossible to not violate multiple laws while driving. I was a police officer in the early 90s, and when I was in the academy, we had to learn all the traffic laws. One of the instructors said, "You really need to learn traffic laws because there are so many of them that you can always articulate probable cause to stop someone while they're driving." For instance, in Texas, it's illegal to not stop before crossing a sidewalk when leaving a parking lot. Texas Transportation Code Section 545.256. I never knew that and it blew me away. So when you leave the gas station parking lot, if you don't come to a stop before you cross the sidewalk, boom, probable cause for a stop. You can get stopped even if you come to a complete stop at a stop sign or traffic light, but don't stop at the designated point. The stop line if present, crosswalk, or before your car crosses the stop sign. Texas Transportation Code Section 544.010. So if your car noses past the stop sign but you completely stop, boom, probable cause for a stop. You have to signal 100 feet before you change lanes. Texas Transportation Code Section 545.04. So if you hit your blinker and immediately change lanes, boom, probable cause to stop. There is all sorts of insane stuff that literally no one except police officers really remembers. Now, police don't generally stop folks for that kind of stuff unless they're looking for probable cause. But the laws are there. I knew an officer who stopped someone because he said that their wipers were not keeping their windshield clear. A motor vehicle shall be equipped with a device that is operated or controlled by the operator of the vehicle and that cleans moisture from the windshield, Texas Transportation Code Section 547.603. Boom. Probable cause for a stop. Now multiply that insane legal detail at the city, county, state, and federal level, and it is literally impossible to not violate some laws every day. Story number 4. I remember I worked for a couple of Indian folks back in the day, and they were boasting about having the new Transformers movie through some download service. Because I wanted to see the movie so badly, I caved and asked them about it. For some reason, I was concerned that surely I would be the one to get in some kind of trouble for it. Anyway, I go home, convince myself to download the movie at around 11 p.m., start playing it just after midnight, and at some point within the next 30 minutes, I hear a loud and urgent-sounding knock on my front door after midnight, after downloading this video. I tiptoe down and say, "Who is it?" through the door, where they then announced it was the city police, to please open up. What the... I opened the door, and they quickly stated there was a break-in at the place I worked at and managed, and that I needed to go in to make a statement and check things over. Last time I ever downloaded a movie. First time was enough for me. Oh, I have a fun story. I used to download a lot of stuff back in the day. One day near Christmas, I'm chilling and reading a book when I hear a pounding on my door. Long story short, I had about a half dozen cops in my front yard, and I nearly got shot because my neighbor had called the suicide hotline and said he was going to kill himself. I remember thinking as I stepped outside with a bunch of guns pointed at me that it was a pretty big reaction for a few pirated movies. Story number 5. Microdose. Ever attempt microdosing with acid instead? That's how I ended up in a full-on trip at work, running a shift at 20-ish years old. That's the day I learned a few things. Micrograms are tiny AF, and LSD isn't laid evenly. My would-be wife and eventually ex-wife came up to me at one point with a really puzzled look on her face. She said, "Whoa, your pupils are 2 different sizes?" All I could muster as I was freaking out because, well, I was high AF and didn't want to be, was what? No. And I walked away to manage the kitchen. We weren't even dating then. Eventually, we got married, and like 9 months into it, I asked her if she remembered that interaction. She lost it when I told her what actually happened. She thought it was fucking hilarious. She was incredibly sheltered at that point, so she had no idea what psychedelics actually did, or how people looked while on them. Though, I'm not sure how she didn't connect 2 and 2 together, because I was super duper upfront about my usage of them when we were discussing starting a relationship. Maybe the 2 events were just so far removed from each other to draw those connections. Story number 6. At least in my state, maybe the US at large, it's illegal to buy contacts, even online, without a valid up-to-date prescription. My vision insurance covers my annual eye exam for glasses, but not for contacts, even though they literally get both prescriptions and all measurements from doing the one exam. The optometrist always even tells me that if I change my mind and want the contact one after all, I can call them within 90's pay, and they'll send it to me. I wear my current contacts to the exam, and they check the fit and how my eyes are doing in them. But the cost for them to give me my contact prescription, just to print out and hand me the information they already have from doing the exam either way, is an additional $112. I am diligent about my eye health, so I go get my annual eye exam promptly every year as soon as I get the notification that I'm due. But unless my prescription has changed, it's remained stable for the past 4 years in a row, I just edit the dates on my previous contact prescription to be current. Change in the optometrist's office phone number to be wrong, so the online retailer would have to make some small extra effort to verify it that they absolutely won't ever bother to do, and have never had an issue ordering contacts online. I'm doing all the steps I'm supposed to wear contacts safely. I just refuse to pay an extra $100 plus every year for literally no reason whatsoever. My current vision insurance even covers the cost of ordering my actual contact lenses, which is rare. On a lot of vision plans I've had in the past, contacts are considered cosmetic and not covered, so it's utterly ridiculous that the exam for them is not. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's story, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more incredible Reddit tales. Share your thoughts or your own experiences in the comments below. I love hearing from you all. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring those amazing stories.